The world of work is changing rapidly, and in this podcast, we're examining the challenges and possibilities emerging within this change. We're talking about everything from labor market information to how to enable the thinking and doing that leads to better workforce development and employment outcomes. This is the Workforce Collective podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Workforce Collective podcast. I'm Caleb Meeks, videographer and content creator for Workforce Collective, and today I'm joined by Vivian Kinnaird, strategy lead and CEO at Workforce Collective. We're discussing what it takes to be a great employer, the importance of creating better workplace culture, and what these changes look like at Workforce Collective as we improve our own workplace culture. So first off, thanks Vivian for being here.
Thanks, Caleb. It's great to be here.
You're very welcome. Let's just get into it.
Okay.
What separates an employer from a great employer, in your opinion?
It's a great question. I think in one word, I would say people. So anybody can employ people, but I think a great employer intentionally focuses on people. The people that work for them, the people that are maybe going to work for them, even the people who maybe worked for them in the past. So a great employer has all kinds of systems and processes and day-to-day practices that pay attention to the people that work there. And I think at the moment, it's very important that employers think about their people, what they're looking for, how they are rewarded at work, and reflect on that from time to time to make sure that the workplace is an engaging space for the workforce.
Okay, yeah, I can totally agree with that. It feels a lot better when you feel like a person rather than a number.
Exactly.
And I know that sometimes workplaces, the workloads can be tough and you got to get stuff done. But I find even just in my history, when you feel good about where you are and you feel like you're actually treated like a person, you can do a lot more.
Exactly. I think there's no doubt about it. Sometimes work is hectic. Sometimes deadlines are fast and furious. And there's a lot of work to get done all the time in most workplaces.
No doubt.
But you're right. When people feel that maybe that workload is going to be temporary because it's just a sudden influx of work, or they feel very appreciated for the work that they're doing, then sometimes those rough patches don't seem so bad. So a great employer would say, okay, let's dig down and get our work done. But at the same time, I really, really appreciate what you're doing here.
That's very great. I kind of said my opinion about it, but in your opinion, why is being a good employer so important in today's job market?
Well, I think today's job market is pretty complex. There's a lot of change going on, and the labor market is tight. We learn about that all the time in the press, just how much of a job seekers market it is out there. The data are mixed on that and what that means. And of course, different sectors have different experiences. But I think in today's labor market, we really need to be focusing on who's in the labor market. It's diverse from perspectives of age, from perspectives of skills and backgrounds, from perspective of all kinds of different backgrounds that people are coming from. It's a diverse workforce. By focusing on people within the workforce and having an organizational culture that is people-oriented, then that's going to appeal to individuals who are maybe looking for those kind of experiences. Work has changed. The pandemic really showed that to us. So the way in which folks are now engaging with their work and thinking about their work means that they're wanting to see it as part of their whole being. What's my life like? I work, I do other things, I have hobbies, I have my relationships, my family, my other things I do outside work. So they're looking to see how work fits into all of that. And I think a great employer will set a culture that is respectful of that.
That makes a lot of sense because the pandemic showed us a lot of things, but I think the big switch to virtual work showed a lot of people that there's that kind of option. I find that there are a lot of people looking for that kind of work, like work from home or flexible work schedule. And like you said, with so many options, people are not so much taking bad employers anymore because there's so many options.
Right, exactly. From a geographical perspective, yes, for certain occupations and types of jobs, geography's become less important as people can work remotely. There's a whole list of jobs out there that are remote or hybrid. And people will travel a bit further for a hybrid experience. If they have to travel 100 kilometers once or twice a week, it's a lot different. So it's really opened up as to the choices people have for where they work, which is definitely a change since 2019. And employers have to take all that on board and realize that people who they may have been able to recruit quite easily, even in a tight labor market before the pandemic, not so easy anymore.
Yeah. So a lot of employers aren't able to offer a work from home schedule because
That's right.
a lot of jobs you need to be on site.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it really does seem like a lot of importance to make sure that you are a good employer,
Right.
especially if you can't offer some of these benefits that other places can.
That's right. And we know from data from across Canada that the vast majority of jobs still need to be on site. I think it's somewhere between 35 and 40% of jobs can be done remotely,
Wow.
but the rest need to be done on site.
Hmm.
So you're right. People will still be going into the workplace by choice or from necessity. And it's doubly important now that those employers in particular are focused on employee well-being and just taking account of what they're hearing from their workforce in order to have a better business or a better organization or get what they have to get done much better.
Yeah, and speaking of employee well-being and better workforce culture, we've been practicing a lot of things to improve our own workplace.
Hmm.
One thing we've been doing is agile output-driven work.
Hmm.
What is that, and what does it look like in practice at Workforce Collective?
Right. It's a great question. I think the simplest way of putting it, the agile work for me is really focused on how you can take the project work that you do and be able to be responsive to external or internal forces. So at Workforce Collective, the vast majority of work we do, as you know, is project based.
Hmm.
There's a lot of stakeholders and partners and different people involved, but things can change. So I think working from an agile perspective means that any project and the deliverables associated with it, we can make changes as we go because of the way we manage the projects and the way we work together. There's always more than one way to get to an answer. Sometimes the external world means that you might have to change, and sometimes even internally. Staffing changes, for example, or the opportunity comes around for a new partnership or a new engagement. It just means you can still work on the project in a way that meets the deadlines, meets the outcomes, but maybe adds a different flavor to what you're doing.
Okay, so that's one thing that we use to improve our workplace
Mhm.
and make some changes to keep up with everything. So another thing we do is flexible work arrangements. That's something we were talking about earlier. So why did Workforce Collective decide to implement flexible work arrangements, like a 4-day work week and the hybrid work from anywhere model? And how's that going?
Okay. Again, it's a great question. I'd say there's a couple of reasons why we decided to look at how we could implement flexible work arrangements. The first one was as an organization that looks at the workforce in general, we were very aware that these conversations were going on across industries, various industries in different parts of the world, even. We were reading about them, we researched them, and we were really curious about how it was going in large organizations, small organizations. And because we are curious about it, we want to be able to do it ourselves as well. So, how are we experiencing
Hmm.
what, as an organization, as an employer, as a group of people who work together? How are we experiencing what we're seeing all around us? So, we're not separated from it, we're within it. So, that's one reason is we really wanted to explore for ourselves, experience it for ourselves. Another reason is because, as we were talking about before, the pandemic highlighted all kinds of work practices that before, I must admit, we never thought were even possible. We very quickly adapted to digital ways of working. We became comfortable with it in all kinds of aspects of our project work, our back of house work, our systems. So it became very obvious that as a way of being a good employer and being able to work effectively with the staff, that arranging work to be flexible and hybrid was a good strategy. But I will say we piloted 4-day work week. We started last summer,
Hmm.
summer of 2022 with a pilot, and we were very intentional about how we did it. We checked in. How's it going? This isn't working. That's not working. What we did find quite early on was sometimes it became difficult to get everybody together when we needed them to get together, or which days of the week were we all going to have meetings because people get busy. How were we going to structure our meetings? Did we just want to meet virtually, or did we feel that a face to face meeting, even now and then, was very important? So these were some of the early kind of trial and error. And we also found that some people prefer to be in the office more than others.
Hmm.
So it's worth the communication and conversations to say, why is that? What works best for everyone? And then agree as a team what the compromise is for some and for others. And it's a work in progress, Caleb. I think we're still working on it. I think it's going well. From my perspective, I
I
think
think
it's
so.
going well. Good. But it's not something we take lightly because we want to make sure it works well for everybody.
Okay, that's really good to know because I'm sure there's some employers out there that might be considering something like this. It's good insight to know that you don't just switch over to
That's right.
4-day. There's a lot of checking in and adjustments, and it doesn't sound like it worked right away.
Right.
So
It didn't. No.
I'm new to the team. I'm only here since November, so I think that it's going really well. And in my eyes, I thought that this is how we always worked.
No. Well, it's
So
kind of nice to know that as a newer member of the team, that was your insight right from the get-go. But it did take a little while for us to settle that down and discuss what was going to work best. And again, as I say, it's still work in progress. I think the move to a 4-day work week is becoming more and more common across lots of different industries. People would say, oh, you can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. But I think there is ways to be creative, even in other types of jobs that are not hybrid or remote. It is possible. I think there's studies out of Europe now that really do show that individuals' productivity in any kind of industry kind of increases when they're on a 4-day work week. But it is linked to, as we talk about being output driven rather than hours driven,
mhm.
right? So I think that's another important thing for employers to think about because it's about what work needs to get done by when and what deadlines look like, not how many hours someone is sitting behind a desk or standing in front of somebody or what they're doing there.
Yeah, I've heard before when you have rested employees, you have productive employees.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's so many people out there that can relate. You kind of feel really exhausted. It's common for people to say, I feel like all I do is work, sleep, and eat.
Yes, it
And
is. And that's not healthy.
no.
Employers would understand that you're not getting the best out of your people if they're just working, sleeping, and eating. Now, I know that we said before, sometimes there's a push and people have to work long hours. Sometimes there's illness and people have to cover shifts. That's a reality. And most people can handle that temporarily.
hmm
It's when it becomes a regular expectation that it becomes unsustainable.
We have the 4-day work week and we can work from home. And I find sometimes if I have to push a project onto a day that I'm not working, I'm a lot more willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, that's not put on me all the time, but I feel like I have this space, if that makes sense, to do that.
Yes, and you're also likely, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're likely motivated to get the project finished because, yeah, you want to see it through.
Yeah.
The fact that you're doing it on a day that you would otherwise maybe not be working on a project is immaterial this week, right? So
Mhm.
it's, as I said, it's when it becomes a kind of an unsustainable grind that people week in, week out. You hear it. Well, it's in the research, but you also hear it on an ad hoc basis. People 50, 60, 70 hours a week just to get through the workload. My question there is why?
Yeah, I think the pay for outcome kind of way we work rather than
Mhm.
the pay for hours motivates me to do my best work
Mhm, mhm,
because that's why
mhm.
I'm here is for my
Yeah.
work. A lot of times people could punch in and say I'm here
Mhm.
and that's their motivation to get paid. But I'm motivated to put out my best work.
Right. And I think that's a really good point because it's about valuing what the output is and it's being accountable for it too. The output is very much what needs to be delivered on time. Our stakeholders expect it. In other contexts, it would be customers or somebody else expects the work to get done. But the motivation is to be accountable, do it on time, do it to a high quality. And that leads to, as an employer, us being real about what individual employees can manage within a decent work week. But yeah, as I say, it's all work in progress, and we'll see how we're going when we talk about it next time.
Doing great so
Yeah,
far. So
yeah,
I'm
thanks.
looking forward to the future.
Yeah.
So that's some of the stuff that we do to improve our workplace culture. How can other employers improve their work culture?
I think I would echo some of the things I've already said, but I would first say notice how it's going. Take a step back as an employer and say, how are staff managed? Are you getting any staff feedback? What's your absence rate look like? Sickness rate? People off? What's your turnover look like? Are you having to constantly recruit staff? Are you able to recruit staff at times of growth? So, what work are you doing behind the scenes in terms of managing people? And I don't necessarily mean that has to be a big HR department or something like that, but someone in the organization just needs to have an eye on that. Also, are you reflecting on how any managers or supervisors or anybody who's overseeing teams of people are keeping up to date with the latest trends in work expectations and managing people? I think that's really important as well, as we were just saying about the way in which expectations are changing, particularly post pandemic. People have opportunities to go elsewhere. And we're seeing especially younger people, quite easily just quitting jobs to look for something else because they're not willing to stick with something. And they're maybe at a time in their life when they can afford to say, I'm walking away for a little while. So I would say to employers, just check in to start, check in with your people, see what training you've got going on with your people managers or supervisors, and then track the trends. I think it's a good return on investment to invest in people because it's a lot more expensive to constantly recruit and train. It's a lot more expensive to constantly have to manage absences. And if you have a lot of absences, then you're putting pressure on existing staff to cover shifts and cover other people who are on short-term or long-term sick. So it's a no-brainer to me to invest in people in the first place, and then you don't have the costs associated with absence management or even recruitment and training on a continual basis.
Yeah.
Because that's getting harder and harder, and it's very expensive.
Yeah, it sounds like a short-term investment for a much longer-term return.
That's right. Once you've taken a look and done a reflection, then you can reach out for support. There's lots of HR support, human resource consultants and specialists that are willing to support. There's lots of agencies, there's training. You could even reach out to us, Workforce Collective, and we'll point you in a direction. We won't necessarily have all the answers ourselves, but we certainly know who's out there to help employers with their people challenges.
Yeah, there's plenty of help, and we are here to help. I think sometimes it will probably be hard for some people. This happens in people's personal life. I'm sure it happens in the workplace too, to take something that once worked before and just take a hard look at it. Like you said, are people leaving? Are you having to hire all the time? Is it hard to hire people? And just notice that's not working, especially if what you were doing did work once before.
Right.
But there's a lot that's changing in our workforce. A lot's changing in the way we conduct things. And there is a lot of help. There's a lot of people that are making changes, and it is working for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's likely to be an example or a model that can be used in across any industry to try and address some of the individual organizational labor market challenges that they've got or workforce challenges that they've got. And it's in the system. There'll be people in the system, in the employment system, in human resource consulting, all kinds of different areas that would be there to help.
All right. Well, thanks, Vivian, for discussing this all with us today. And I hope that any employers looking to improve their workplace culture got some very valuable insight as well. Thank you to everyone listening. And if you're an employer looking to improve your workplace culture, contact us at Workforce Collective, and we'll be happy to help where we can. We invite everyone to follow us along our journey on Twitter, LinkedIn, and our website at workforcecollective.ca. And stay tuned for more episodes of the Workforce Collective podcast. You can find us on YouTube, on Spotify, or just say, Alexa, play the Workforce Collective podcast. Thank you all for being here.